Good morning. I'm back for a Thursday chat session. Joel Fieri here. Let's see. I see one comment. I know anybody. Is Carrie? It is Carrie. Good morning, Carrie. How you doing? So it's Thursday. Excuse me. And as we'll wait for everybody to come on in before we get going with the video and the meat of what I want to talk about. But I think obviously the last couple weeks have been kind of a showcase of leadership on every end of the spectrum. I've always been an admirer of Benjamin Netanyahu. I've always considered myself, before Trump was elected or between Trump's terms, I always considered him the leader of the free world. They'll be here in a second. All right. You're always the intermediary there, Carrie. Thanks. I appreciate it. Again, all my scoldings of Michael have not worked. He still keeps people late, but that's okay. Michael teaches some good stuff. So, but I always considered him the leader of the free world, with his rhetoric and his style, no nonsense style. So now that Trump is back in the White House again, it's pretty obvious who the leader of the free world is, and I'll get to that in a minute. So, but it's been, like I said, it's been a very interesting couple of weeks. Last week I did my podcast on World War III because that's how serious this stuff is. Morning, Chloe. Good to see you. Because there's nothing that screams World War III and apocalypse more than when you start talking about bombing nuclear facilities, right? So, good morning. Hello. I think we've seen you in a while, have we? Netanyahu, do we still trust him? Why wouldn't we trust him? I would trust him to do what's in the best interest of his country, which is all really you talk about in talking about leadership and trusting, and this is what Trump realizes in his style. I'll go ahead and play this for you, and
turning now to some breaking news as we continue to follow all of the developments out of the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Taking a look here at a post from the Associated Press, it says breaking: NATO leaders agreed on a massive hike in defense spending after pressure from President Trump. I want to bring us out to some images that we had earlier on today. This was President Trump meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte early on this Wednesday. And the Associated Press here saying that NATO leaders agreed Wednesday on a massive hike in defense spending after pressure from President Trump, and expressed their, quote, ironclad commitment to come to each other's aid if attacked. The 32 leaders endorsed a final summit statement saying, quote, allies commit to invest 5% of GDP annually on core defense requirements, as well as defense and security related spending by 2035 to ensure.
Okay, you get the idea. And the reason I'm playing that is it sounds like kind of a mundane point. Let's see what we got. So best interest of the country is destroying Iranian civilization, maybe Iranian leadership. Iranian civilization is not destroyed. It's up to the Iranians now. Their leadership has been pummeled. The plans, I personally believe Netanyahu is a warrior and a patriot. So Iran has been the bane of the world since I was 19 years old. And what happened is really was one thing Netanyahu did is he telegraphed this punch, and he did very much what the Allies did in World War II, or tried to do in World War II with Japan, especially before the atom bombs. Everyone says the atom bombs were a war crime. Not everybody says that. But before we dropped those atom bombs, we dropped 100 million leaflets on Japan saying, "Hey, get out of the cities." Okay. This is a very civilized way of doing war. All right. And like I said last week, the precision targeting that they did, Israeli intelligence is like nothing else. And Israeli execution is like nothing else. They're surgical about it. So it is, let me see how I get this one off. Yeah. So, and Trump joining in, not sure if that was a wise move or not. Again, you get conflicting reports. There's this thing leaked out that not all the uranium enrichment, the enriched uranium was found. But there's so much disinformation on this. Is something that's going to have to play out. But the reason I played that clip with Trump going to the NATO partners and getting them to contribute to hike their defense spending it seems like a kind of a mundane point, or, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of leaders meeting and it's just a number, 5%. That's huge. All through the Cold War, and Trump has said this a lot, and a lot of people, this is one reason a lot of people like him. We have been paying the bill on Europe's security since 1945. Not to mention all that we paid for the rebuilding and the Marshall Plan, but we've also paid for their security. And they have been steadfastly refusing to up their defense spending. And nobody on our end has ever seemed to care. No president. Some of them has kind of used the rhetoric, but when push comes to shove, Europe has been kind of almost, they've been really insistent on it, that they aren't going to spend enough on their defense, what they need to for their own defense. Even in the light of all the things that Putin has done with Ukraine, don't forget, 11 years ago, he attacked Ukraine. And he's been, very aggressive and thumping his chest at Europe, and they haven't seemed to respond in a way that they take responsibility for their own defense. They've relied on us, and we have jumped in every time and let them do this. We've enabled this situation where the countries that most need protection don't spend what they need to on their militaries. And no American president has had the strength of leadership to make them do it, basically. Okay, Carrie. I used to trust him completely. Now there's just something twisting my mind about him now. And no, I don't know why, really. Okay. Well, this is Israel and Iran, especially Iran. Iran is a different kind of beast than any other player on the world stage, I think, because they have never been directly attacking Israel until recently. They've always used Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels and whoever else to make trouble for them. They've always financed these people. They've always sponsored terror. They are the world's #1 sponsor of terror. And it all started, and they've been that way for 46 years. Okay. That's been their plan. That's been their method. That's been their modus operandi, was not to do it themselves. Now, and I think they were just biding their time until they can get a nuclear weapon when they could basically attack Israel. And that's what it's all about. It's all about destroying Israel. So it's funny. There's never been a country quite like Israel either, in that it's surrounded by its enemies, and everyone will give lip service to the fact that they have a right to defend themselves. It's always funny. Everyone will say, yeah, Israel has a right to defend itself, but when Israel does actually defend itself, everyone just piles on the criticism. So it's really a different beast, a different animal. And it's funny how everyone seems to care so much about Israel, what they do and what they don't. No other country in the world, I don't think there's another country in the world that's in Israel's position, but no other country in the world gets the constant scrutiny that Israel does. There are other countries that are bad actors, that abuse their neighbors, and no, we don't hear anything about it. Israel legitimately defends itself, and we pick apart everything they do. So EU, all is well, be positive. There's nothing to talk about it. Everyone be happy, enjoy life. Okay. We have rules here. No one talks about anything. It's in the hands of God. Well, and I don't worry you. What will be, will be. I firmly believe it is in God's hand. Yes, it is God's hand, but he also gives us leaders and gives us responsibility. He's active. God is active in the world and active in our lives, active in the big picture, on the world stage. He's also active. He's a God that chooses to be active in our own personal lives, which is really amazing. But he does put us on this earth to stand for good and stand against evil. And we have that choice, and our actions have consequences. So leaders, going back to the EU or the NATO thing, with them agreeing to up their defense spending. And if you saw the visual on that, it's, let's see if the visual's up here. Let me do this here. I'm going to add it back to the stage because I just want you to see the visual of it.
To invest 5% of GDP annually on core defense requirements, as well as defense and security related spending by 2035 to ensure our individual and collective obligations. Spain had already officially announced that it cannot meet the target, and others have voiced reservations and expressed their, quote, ironclad commitment that NATO leaders agree.
Here, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. But I want you to see this visual right here. It's this is Trump doing this. He's, by the force of his will, by negotiating from a position of strength that the United States uniquely has, he is bringing along these world leaders. These are NATO leaders sitting next to him that are doing this. And this visual right here is very, to me, says this is Trump leading the rest of the world, because he is the most powerful man on earth. And he understands that he has to lead. Now, whether you like what he does or not, that's not what I'm talking about. I really like this move. This is what's needed to happen for 50 years now. Or my lifetime, really 65 years. We've been going back to World War II. We've been putting the bill, and it's like a parent that keeps letting their child, keeps bailing out their rebellious child or their irresponsible child, it just perpetuates itself. And we've had permissive parents, if you want to say, for almost 80 years now, actually 80 years after World War II. And now for the first time, someone is saying, no, we will not, this is not the way it's going to happen anymore. You will pay your fair share. Or I don't know what he threatened, or I don't know what he negotiated, but now you can see he's sitting there off by himself with the red tie, the red power tie, right? And these other European leaders are like, okay, we're in line now. We finally, there was finally an adult at the other end of the table that had the authority and had the power, that was willing to use it. And this could have happened, like I said, it could have happened 80 years ago, and we would have saved, how many countless trillions of dollars. But again, and Trump's really the first leader that's wanted to save money, or that's even given an effort to save money. So let's see, Chloe, what do you say? America is so abused. Look at the price of drugs here and abroad. $2,000 for a cancer drug here and $20 in Mexico. Look at the price of gas abroad. You guys travel abroad a lot. I don't that much. Look at all the money we spend all over the world while our own people suffer. Consider the people in North Carolina still. Yeah, I haven't heard much about that, but I know that was particularly irresponsible. The handling of that was what the left accused George Bush of doing during Katrina, the hurricane. What they did to the people in North Carolina was truly a crime, or what they didn't do to help them. But again, it was election year, right? North Carolina is a red state. So again, that's the difference between an adult in the White House and a petulant child in the White House. So, and like I said, so many of our leaders could have done this, right? But they didn't, because, you get the leadership that you deserve. You get the leadership you vote for. And it got me thinking, I have been going through, as I think I told you last week, I've been going through the Old Testament, or actually the Bible, in a year. And so I do one reading from the Old Testament every year, or every day, and another from the New Testament. And I just got through Chronicles, First, Second Kings, Chronicles, all that, talking about the kings of Israel, and how it just strikes you how many of the kings of Israel were just horrible. And then it came across this little chart that kind of gives a little visual. The red on this is kings that were bad, kings that did evil. And the green is kings that did good. Yellow is kings that were kind of neutral. So, and as you can see, it was mostly, and I was struck when I was reading this, the state of mankind is bad leadership. One of my favorite talk show hosts is Dennis Prager, who's not on the air anymore. He had a horrible accident, but he used to talk about Russia. He's an expert in Russia, in Russian history. And he was talking about how Putin came to power and why Putin is still in power. And as near as they can figure, the elections in Russia were fairly honest. They were fairly above board. And yet Putin still was elected. And what Dennis Prager says is, that's the thing about Russia. Russians prefer to be ruled, pardon my language, by cruel bastards, because that's just what they want. Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, all these guys, those were the communist leaders. And then communism, Boris Yeltsin didn't last. Boris Yeltsin was a good man, but he did not have what it takes to govern Russia, because they don't want that. So very quickly, a guy like Putin came up, and he's held on to power because I think the Russians, they've been so battered in history, and they've been so attacked and decimated. World War II, they lost 25 million people, that they don't trust a nice guy. I don't think so. But then when you look at all leaders through world history, and it's very hard to find good leadership. We live in a broken world, and the old adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What do you say? Putin also takes care of his people. Well, he doesn't starve them to death like Stalin did. That's for sure. I heard the other day that Trump refused to help North Carolina. I don't know. I haven't heard that. I would doubt that. But that hasn't been in the news. So I really don't know about that situation. So, but anyway, so looking at this, going through, God warned the people of Israel. They said, Israel said, we want a king like everybody else has. But God's design was to have decentralized power. God was the first, conservative, small government activist. Put it that way. God's design is just that power. By God's design, government works best when it's spread out and it's local. When you have various judges, and you have a judge in your area that you can go to and address your grievances, or get justice, or petition for something, that works much better than having a central king, a centralized authority. But man wants centralized authority. Something about us, we want a king, we want a dictator, we want a czar. Okay, we want that, and yet it's part of our broken nature. And no matter how bad the leadership is, we still, and how bad it affects our lives. I've been hearing on the news lately, this election in New York City, that the Democrats nominated someone who's an avowed socialist communist, who's promising free stuff for everybody. And, the government of New York is going to the mayor of New York is going to take care of everyone in New York City, 8 million people. And people go for this. He's the nominee for mayor of New York. He's going to run against some Republican that doesn't stand a chance in New York City. And New York City is going to go communist because New York City wants a bad leader. Okay. Israel, no matter, God had proven himself right in everything, but yet they wanted a king like everybody else. It's just our nature to want bad leadership, and almost every king after that. Saul was a disaster. David was supposedly the best king, but I can see why in some ways, but I'm like, why is David seen as a man after God's own heart when he killed his friend and took his wife, and not to mention all the other stuff he did. But and Solomon should have been the greatest king of all, and he started off with wisdom. Solomon breaks my heart because Solomon's first prayer was, God, give me wisdom so I can govern your people. And God was so pleased with that. And yet it didn't take long for Solomon to fall into the same thing that the other kings after him did, and what Saul and his father did before him. There's just something about having that centralized power, and doing things unilaterally. That's why Trump, I like that visual of Trump so much, is because he's not, behind the scenes, he's using his power, but the visual there is, hey, these guys are coming along with me. They've agreed to do it. We've made a deal. So he's very much win-win. Um, so, but then again, when you have that kind of power, it's very, very tempting to abuse it. And the one thing that I worry about with Trump is he is a very strong leader. I worry about all the executive orders. I don't mind. I like the executive orders he did when he first came in, all those executive orders in the first 100 days. But it's all for naught if those aren't codified into law by Congress, because then that's a strong central leader. And our government was designed, and the founding fathers were wise enough to know to look at the Bible and say, hey, we've got to spread out power. We've got to decentralize power. But just like the people in New York City, we as a people, we like this. We like the strong leader, right? We want, and we've got to resist the temptation to put all that power, even though Trump uses his power very well, and guys like Netanyahu use their power very well to serve their people. He can easily devolve into some kind of authoritarian dysfunction very easily. That's why the one thing, as much as I like Trump's leadership, the one thing I worry about is Congress. Are the Republicans in Congress going to codify all these things? Are they going to take responsibility and leadership of their own and back him up on this? Because it can't be executive orders unless this is codified into law. The next president, if it's a Democrat, can undo, or even a Republican, a weak-kneed Republican, they can undo all those executive orders. So I think it's a really interesting time. And going back to the Bible, we need to look at that and hopefully learn lessons from this. It's very, very, very hard to find a good leader in this world. We've got one now. We've got two now, as far as I can say. Netanyahu and Trump are doing what needs to be done behind the scenes. A lot of world leaders are very, very happy with what they've done. Not a lot of people are coming to Iran's aid, but it has to be spread out to the people, and that's the only way it will work. Because once Trump is gone, once this term is over, what's going to be next? What kind of leader are we going to have then? J.D. Vance seems like a good guy, but not a lot of experience there. So let's see. What do we got here? So saw the other day, Putin outlaw any satanic worship for houses of worship. That's interesting. Not the news. Some big mouth lib spewing PS. Okay. Oh, this guy from New York. I don't know his origin, but he is Muslim, and that's exactly what the Muslim mission statement. In writing, they infiltrate the U.S. hierarchy and government so they can take it over. It's funny. I saw an analysis that the group, the electorate that got him elected, was single liberal women, young women. So take that from what the demographic that votes most strongly for the socialist model is young, single, liberal women. So, and they're the ones that probably will suffer the most under Muslim leadership. So, yeah, Congress. I agree. What can you do? Well, Joel, you made me feel better about Netanyahu. Good. I think, like I said, I think it needed to be done. So you're correct, Chloe. Keep voting that way. They won't see it until it happens. So, well, I'm glad you feel better, Carrie. And that's all the time I have. So we'll see you hopefully tomorrow with Ben. I know we weren't on last week. Something happened. But hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. If not, I will see you next Thursday. Thanks for listening. I'm overtime, so I got to go. Bye.